Hey guys, Excoundrel here, welcome to the channel. This is a video about all of the potential builds, as many new builds as I could physically find and think of for update 3.5. Now I have drawn inspiration from content creators, guides, and wherever possible I have linked them in the description below. The main people that I have found useful when building up towards this next update in terms of builds has been deisik, so I'm going to link deisik's Twitch channel, his Twitter, and also the spreadsheet that he used. I'm then going to link JinxedJK, who had a really good video on Blaster Brawlers for update 3.5 or TFT 3.5 mid-set update. Going to link that video and all of Jinxed's social media channels in the link below. And then there was a Reddit guide on Vayne Sniper, which I'm going to link as well. Don't know the content creator who made it, but it's a really good Reddit guide, which I'm going to link to you in the description below as well. They are the main people that I drew inspiration from in collating these builds. There are a lot of builds also that I've put in myself as well, but all the kind of the purpose of this video is to give you as many builds to try out as possible. I am not going to do item variations because it's going to take too long. I'm not going to do mid-game and early game because it will take too long. This is just to give you some goals to shoot for when building new builds on the update. If you're a sort of an experienced player, you might be able to figure out how to get there by yourself. If you need some more time, I really recommend that you go and check out streamers and also other YouTubers that are creating content about how they got from early game to mid game to late game with some of the builds that they're playing. Some builds I have not included because I'm not sure how viable they're going to be, things like Space Jam because they lost Cassi, and also I'm going to have missed some builds that have been out there as well. There are lots of new builds being tested. What I'm going to do about a week into the mid-set update, maybe 4 or 5 days, once we have a good established meta, I'm going to remake the video and trim down the build list to the ones that are actually competitively viable. But for now, this is going to be good for testing out in normals. This is going to be good for if you just want to get out there and try some builds. These are builds that have been tested on the PBE, but again, we are not sure how competitively viable they are and where they sit in the meta. So this is not a tier list. I have not ranked them by how good I think they are. It is purely just builds and lots of them. And speaking of which, go to the description below and click on the timestamps for all of the builds because there are lots in this video, and to watch it from back to front might be long and confusing. So if you want to go and check out specific builds, the links are in the description below to both the builder, which I've used lolchess.gg for the builder today, and also to the point in the video where I talk about those builds, okay? That's the way I would recommend doing this. Also, thanks to G2A for sponsoring the channel. The reference link is in the description below. Now let's dive into the video. First of all, I'm covering a very, I guess, well-known composition in the form of Blaster Brawler, but this time with some changes. Now, I will say that this has been tested a lot by people on the PBE as of late. It's probably going to be one of the strongest builds on the update. Jinx has basically become the new Kale in terms of just a really solid late game carry. What I would say is that a guy called JinxedJK did a really good video on Blaster Brawler and a lot of the combinations, and some of the variations of Blaster Brawler that I'm going to put in this video, he covers more extensively in the video than I do. So let's start off with the first. This is basically Battlecast Blaster Brawler. So essentially you're running 4 Battlecast, 4 Brawler, 2 Blasters, Mystics, and Protector at level 9. You're going to have the Lulu. If you have Protector Spat for Cassiopeia, it makes her very strong. In terms of items that you should prioritize, Jinx should get your item priority and then Cassiopeia with blue buff, for instance. Cassiopeia is a very, very strong unit on the new update. She's Mystic Battlecast, which means you can slot her into a lot of good compositions. And with Cogmore being a Battlecast, he's a really good mid-game holder for items that you can then transfer over to Jinx. Now, this composition has a good front line. It deals a lot of damage. And it will have legs in the late game, especially when you add Lulu. I think this is going to be a very strong variation of the Blaster Brawler composition. And again, itemization can vary, but Red Buff, Giant Slayer, and Trapclaw on Jinx is a pretty good solid start. Otherwise, you can do something more classic like Infinity Edge, which Deathblade, you know, or we can go Giant Slayer, Deathblade. If there's lots of Vanguards, you can go Last Whisper. But this is just an example of a variation of Blaster Brawler. I'm going to go through lots of variations of Blaster Brawler in this video, but this is the first one that I wanted to touch on. So you can keep this logged as a good late game composition where you can try and aim for it. Now let's go into another variation. So this variation, also covered in JinxedJK's video, is essentially the 4 Mystic variation. This is going to help you versus things like Janna. This is going to help you versus things like the 6 Sorcerer build, which you're going to see a lot of on the coming update. So this is why Blaster Brawler is quite flexible. The only problem, wait, we drop Alawi. The only problem with this build right here is that you are a little bit light on frontline. So what I would say is that it's actually good versus Sorcerers, because obviously your frontline matters a little bit less versus Sorcerers because their basic attacks don't do as much damage. But I would say that if you're going into any other matchup, this is going to fall apart a bit more quickly, especially versus things like snipers, because you just won't have the front line necessary to deal with those kind of compositions. So this is the Mystic variation of the Blaster Brawler comp, which is very strong as well, I think. But again, this is a tech, and it's against certain compositions. I don't think this Mystic variation is going to be good versus a lot of the field. It's probably going to be a good late game tech if you're going up against the 6 Sorcerer Gangplank or 6 Sorcerer Riven builds, which are very strong. This is another variation that's included in the JinxedJK video, where it's essentially 4 Chrono, 4 Brawler. I think this is going to be a strong variation as well. I think this is going to be a variation that's going to be good against a lot of the field, but obviously it doesn't have any form of Mystic in it, so it's going to be a little bit weaker to magic damage. It's another good variation that you can play for, though. You have a stronger front line with the 4 Brawlers. You have the Rebel buff, which is going to be obviously strong in the next update for Jinx, and you've got 4 Chrono, so you're going to ramp up really quickly as well. Consider this variation of Blaster Brawler. It's a good late game aim for you guys to have. It's level 9, so Thresh would come in probably at the end, or you put Thresh in instead of Wukong, for instance, and then you bring the Wukong in from the bench. But you should be aiming for Aurelion Sol or any kind of rebel there, to be honest with you. But the four Brawlers and the 2 Blasters. 4 Blasters actually a little bit overrated, but I think it's more achievable now that we have no misfortune needed for it to be strong. Here is a version of Blaster Brawler that I also think is going to be really strong on the next update, which is essentially Vanguard, Chrono, Astro, Gangplank. I think it's genuinely going to be really good, but you need to be level 9 to make it work. But you can use Bard in the mid game with Nautilus and Gnar to try and sort of generate as much XP as physically possible. But I think this will be a really good variation of Blaster Brawler. One thing that I'm trying to get through to you guys is that there is going to be a lot of Blaster Brawler on this next update, and a lot of Rebels, and a lot of Jinx, basically, because it's going to be a very, very strong composition in general. But I do like this variation of Blaster Brawler. I do think it could be very strong. And it's kind of utilizing some of the new components as well. You're going to have a lot of CC with Wukong, Nautilus, Gnar. It's basically like the CC-heavy Blaster Brawler composition, and I'm actually really excited to try this one out specifically. You can replace Malphite. Actually, no, you can't replace Malphite, because Malphite is giving you the Brawler bonus. But I just think this is going to be an interesting version to try out. And obviously, with no demo spat, you have to run the Ziggs to make sure that the Gangplank gets the stun. But I think that this could be another good variation of the Blaster Brawler composition. And again, this is maneuverable. You can put Jinx a little bit further forward if you so choose. Doesn't really matter where you put the Ziggs, to be honest. He's not that impactful. But you can put the Jinx a little bit further forward as well if you like. I think this is going to be an interesting variation of Blaster Brawler that I want to try out specifically. I think it'll be very, very CC heavy and potentially very good. If you want to run the 4 Blaster, 4 Brawler variation, I think this could be a good version of it, with Graves, Kog'Maw, Ezreal, Jinx as your Blasters, and then Blitzcrank, Illaoi, Gnar, and Vi as your Brawlers. You're going to get the Battlecast from the Kog'Maw and the Illaoi. You're going to get the Chrono from Blitzcrank and Ezreal. And then you've got the 4 Brawlers and the 4 Blasters. So this could be a good variation of the Brawler Blaster build. But again, I do think that 4 Blasters is a bit overrated. Because, for instance, in this particular scenario, Kog'Maw and Graves could just be something better. So a good version of this build that we've seen previously is the one that runs Cassiopeia and the one that runs Lulu, for instance, that we saw from JinxedJK, but this is a 4 Blaster, 4 Brawler variant that you could run as well if you're in that situation and you need to run it. It's still going to be very good in the late game. And again, I'm just keeping the items open for you. Again, things like Redemption and Frozen Heart are good on Gnar, etc., etc. You could run this variation of Blaster Brawler as well. There is a lot of Blaster Brawler variations that you could run on this next update, but this video is supposed to be everything that you need to get started on update 3.5. Now moving on to Rebels. Now, Rebels are really interesting on this coming update. I think they're going to be very strong, and you can see that the Ziggs Gangplank combo is still alive and well. Zed, being one of the new additions to the Rebel team, makes him super strong. He's also a good Jinx item holder. So what you can do in the early game is run Zed as your Jinx item holder, and then essentially transfer things from Zed over to Jinx and then remake Zed later on. You run the Echo as well, because Echo is actually super good on this next update. So this is a very strong late game Rebel composition that you can run. And Rebels in general, I think especially the Ziggs Gangplank version that you've seen run a lot on this update is going to be very good on this next upcoming update. And again, Jinx's items can be flexible. This is coming from a guy called deisik, who I'm going to link all the people in the description, by the way, who have kind of come up and inspired some of these builds. But again, you don't have to run the Deathblade Runan's Hurricane variation, which we have seen, because even though Deathblade has been changed, it's still a super strong item. You can still continue to run anything that would be good on Jinx. And again, from what you've seen in my previous ones, has been things like Giant Slayer, Trapclaw, and Red Buff. Like, blasters are very, 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 I think, flexible in terms of what they can run. But this is going to be a very strong version of the Rebels build, which we're going to see quite a lot of. We've moved off Blaster Brawler now. I think we've gone through enough variations there. But this is going to be a strong version of the Rebels build that we've got. Here is another variation of Rebels, this time not running Zed and not running Echo, but instead running Blitzcrank and Malphite. This is going to allow your Jinx to get resets more quickly. As I just previously talked about, you can run a multitude of items on the Jinx. It's all about the Ziggs Gangplank for a lot of the CC. But this is again running Chrono with the Ezreal, and you're running Malphite and Blitzcrank for the extra Brawler bonus. This is also going to be a potentially strong version of Rebels on the next coming update. And I'll call this one Variation 2 in the description below so you know exactly what I mean. This is another variation of a build that I thought about running. It's Blade Master Zed in Infiltrator, sorry, in Rebels, where you run the Gangplank and the Ziggs. Then you have the Echo for the Infiltrator bonus later on. It's definitely going to be an interesting one to try out. You need the Blade Master bonus. If you don't have the Blade Master, you can just run a Rapid Fire Cannon instead. But realistically, the Blade Master is probably better, because then you're going to activate Master Yi and Yasuo. And it's about getting Zed to 3-star. Trying to get Gangplank on the field for the CC, and obviously having Echo in there as well. You're lacking a little bit of frontline, but it all relies on Gangplank and Ziggs, you know, working together as they have done in previous updates. So feel free to try this one out. Not sure how good it's going to be, but I'm throwing it out there anyway. So classic protectors will be coming back as well. There will be some variations of this, but let's start off with the classic protectors, where you're looking for Xin Zhao, Rakan, Jarvan, and Neeko at 3-star, and then you're going to add the snipers with Jhin and Ashe, with the Celestials being at 4, and obviously having the Mystic with Soraka and Lulu too. This is going to be strong. Some adjustments that you can make, and some adjustments that I potentially consider that you sort of think about, is if you get a protector spat, what you can do is you can take out one of the mystics, like let's say you don't find Lulu, for instance, even though Lulu's very strong. What you can do is take out this and add in the Cassiopeia, wherever she is. I'm going to share both of these builds, by the way. So if you get a Protector Spat in this particular instance, you can add in the Cassiopeia over one of the Mystics. I would still keep the rest of the Protectors because they're strong, but you can add the Cassiopeia in. You can even bring her over to the front line so to make sure that she can sort of hit everybody. And especially if you find Blue Buff, you're going to have Blue Buff Protector Spat Cassiopeia in a Protector composition, which is very strong. Then what you can do is you can go on and add Urgot, which gives you 6 Protectors. And Urgot, as you know, is very, very strong. So this could be a very, very strong version. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So this is at level 9 right now. You could actually sacrifice the Jhin over the 6 protectors if you want, but this is going to be a super strong 6 protector variation, which has got some late game legs if you find a protector spat. If you don't find a protector spat, I'm going to share this one quickly. If you don't find the protector spat, don't worry about the Cassiopeia. Stick to the Lulu, but I would still recommend thinking about the Urgot because he is a protector and he's very strong as a late game addition as well. So we're just going to quickly add that one. And now we're going to add this one as well as another variation. Cool. 6-star Guardian, 4 Sorcerers. It's coming back in a big way thanks to Janna, and this will be the late game variation. Your priority should be getting Neeko to 3-star. She's going to be your main tank, and she's going to be doing the majority of the CCing and protection for your team. Then when you get to the late game, you want to make sure that you have Janna in. That could be any other Star Guardian that you want. It could be Poppy, it could be anybody realistically if you don't have the Janna. But this is a very strong late game Star Guardian variation, which is going to be seeing a lot of play, I feel, in the next coming update. I think Star Guardians are definitely coming back, mainly because Janna is so incredibly strong as well. But this is like a variation that you can consider. This is from deisik as well. A lot of the comps that he has been testing have gone up in a spreadsheet. So again, I'm going to link all of his socials in the description below. Again, I don't know if I'd position like this. I generally tend to backline everything when I'm playing. I generally tend to backline everything when I'm playing Star Guardians, but again, I think you should feel free to test the positioning and see what works for you. This is a composition that's going to get a lot of play in the upcoming update, where it's essentially 6 Sorcerer plus Gangplank with the Demolitionists. You don't need Rumble. Rumble will help, but you don't need him, technically. But the reason being is that you can't actually get 8 Sorcerer anymore, so there isn't really any point going for anything else. This is a level 8 composition, as you can see. Annie can be any of the other Sorcerers. It doesn't need to be Annie, but Annie is a bit more of a frontline for your Sorcerer composition, but Annie could be replaced for Syndra, pretty easily. So this is going to be a very strong update on the upcoming patch. I also think that Victor could definitely take some items. So items that would work well on Victor. Sorry, I'm just sort of moving things around. So things like Blue Buff can go well on Victor. I think that you can give him Morello's as well. Morello's works really nicely on Victor. So again, don't discount Victor items. If you get Ginsu's Rage Blade, definitely put it on Xerath. This is just basically blow them up and blow them up in one shot composition. It's still very strong. It's going to be seen a lot on the upcoming update. GP 6 Sorcerers, the nuke composition. So this build works very similarly, but it's actually based around Riven instead, and you run the Gnar as an extra form of CC to help keep the sort of the Riven safe and the rest of the backline safe as well. And again, in terms of itemization, Blue Buff and Morellonomicon can go onto Victor. Riven can kind of take a lot of things. There's been some debate about whether Blue Buff is good on Riven, but apparently the way that her auto-attack animations work, it doesn't actually matter, and actually it's better to give her another item because Blue Buff doesn't even help her that much. So I think Quicksilver is really important so that she doesn't get CC'd, because it's all about her generating huge shields. I think a Rabadon's will definitely help. Other than that, you can give her any kind of defensive itemization. But Rabadons and Quicksilver feel necessary. And then if you can't find the extra Rabadons, any extra defensive itemization, like a GA as well would work perfectly fine on her. A GA works nicely on Gnar too. So this is the 6 Sorcerer Riven composition that you're probably going to see quite a lot of. In the next update as well. It's going to be very strong. So this build has been floating around quite a lot as well, and this is the Mech Sorcerer composition. Mech Infiltrator no longer works as effectively. You can play Mech 6 Infiltrator, but you need an Infiltrator Talons. Mech Sorcerer is probably going to be the more consistent composition that we're going to be seeing a lot of in the next coming update. What I would say about Mech Sorcerer is there are a couple of ways to focus, but I would say that Xerath items take precedent over mech items, at least according to deisik. That's the case. There are other mech variations that I'm going to talk about in just a moment, but the Mech Sorcerer composition is probably going to see a decent amount of play in this next update, so consider Mech Sorcerer. It's got 4 Sorcerers, and this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6... This is 8 units right now. And so then at level 9, what you can do is you can add Gangplank. So what I would say is, like, the ultimate variation of this composition is you go to 9, and then if you've got a GA, great, you add it on Gangplank. But otherwise, you add Gangplank at 9 to give you the Demolitionist as well. This is the ultimate variation of this composition, and I genuinely think it could be good. You do not try and hit 3-star mech anymore. What you do is you get your 2-star mech, and then you just go to 9 to be able to enable Gangplank and Xerath, and that will be your win condition in this composition. Here's another version of a build that I thought would be pretty good. It is a Mech Infiltrator build, so similar to the Mech Infiltrator builds that we've seen on the previous update, but it focuses around getting Z to 3-star. So you would hyper-roll this build until you get Z to 3-star, and then you're looking to go to level 8 to activate Victor and Gangplank. Obviously, Gangplank could be Ziggs until you find the Gangplank, but obviously the sooner that you find the Gangplank, the better. And you bring on the Victor for the Sorcerer bonus, plus the Battlecast with the Nocturne, which can be pretty useful as well. So this is Mech Infiltrator on 3.5. I'm interested in seeing if this works out. This is going to be an interesting one to try, but it's all about Zed being the hyper roll carry here, running the rapid fire cannon, the Infinity Edge for the 100% crit. Yeah, good one to test out, if I'm completely honest with you. I'd like to give this one a go. So there has been some talk about 6 Battlecast, and I think it's potentially doable, but I don't think it's going to be very strong. The reason being is I think Battlecast falls off really hard. Now, we've already talked about the 4 Battlecast variation, where you run the Blasters and the Brawlers instead. This is the 6 Battlecast variation, where you would either look to 3-star Cassiopeia or Cogmore to be your primary carries. Jinx can take extra items, Urgot can take defensive items. I'm not entirely sold on this composition as of yet. I don't know how good it's going to be, but if you want to try something new, you could have a look at playing 6 Battlecast. It really relies on Cassiopeia or Cogmore to get you through the most of the game. Jinx can come in later on, and Urgot obviously a good option the later that you go. Then if you go to level 9, what you're going to want to add is probably something like a Lulu. Because she's gonna give you Mystic, basically. You can either add Lulu or Soraka, I would say. I think both of them are fine. If you get a Celestial spat, Lulu's nice, because then you're going to get Celestial added to this composition too. Protector spat on Cassiopeia, Celestial spat on whoever the hell you like, and this would be an okay looking composition. I do think that you need to snowball like crazy with Cogmore or Cassiopeia though to make this work in the late game. I think there are just better variations, and I think the 4 Battlecast Blaster Brawler composition is better than this, but I want to offer this up just in case anybody wants to test it. Finally, we get to talk about snipers again. This is a variation of snipers that I've seen a lot of people talk about, and it's essentially Vanguard Brawler 4 snipers, and it's got Astro in there as well because you're running Teemo, Nautilus, and Gnar. Lots of CC, lots of damage. You've got the Celestial in there from having the Lulu at 9. I genuinely think this is going to be a super good build on the next update, and I love it because I love Jhin. Jhin's one of my favorite carries in the game, so I think this could be a very strong sniper variation for snipers with a really strong front line, using the Astro in there as well. It's going to be hard to hit. I think Lulu comes in last because the Celestial bonus. Yeah, I think Lulu probably comes in last. Maybe Vi. It might be Vi or Lulu coming in last in this situation. Depends on what you find. I'd actually probably prioritize Lulu over Vi in this particular scenario. But either way, very strong late game build. Itemization for Jhin is flexible. You can play Infinity Edge. You can put him with a Quicksilver. So, where is the Quicksilver? I can't even find it. There it is. You can put it with a Quicksilver, so you can actually go in the corner. You can obviously flex these about, whatever you like. Strong build. Would consider that you look at it. You can also run with Caitlyn from the early game because you keep her for the late game composition as well. I just wouldn't put any items on her unless you're able to remake her. So, good sniper variation, which I think could be good on the next update. This is essentially another sniper build, but it's all about Jhin, so you're just running 2 snipers. This is very similar to the sniper build that was called Korean Sniper previously. You're still running the Gangplank and the Rumble. You've got the Wukong Thresh, the Lulu, the Karma, the Ashe. Very similar to the Korean Jhin build that you saw previously. You're just not running the Deathblade Runans because Deathblade does not snowball anymore, so it's better to give Jhin as much damage on his single target as possible. So this is essentially the same as Korean Sniper. Adjustments that you could make, you could obviously remove Thresh, and you could put in Jayce. So what I would recommend coming in at level 9 is, to be honest, not even Jayce. I think actually, if you're going for another Vanguard, it might even be better, especially with no items, to just strictly run the Nautilus, because the Nautilus is probably going to be more useful than the Jayce in a lot of scenarios. So this would be the level 9 version of this build. And again, this is more about 2 snipers with a solid front line running that Gangplank Rumble combo that you would have seen on the previous update. Again, going to be very strong. Snipers are going to be quite flexible, I think, on this next patch. Okay, guys, this is the variation of Darkstar. This is 4 Darkstar. I don't think 6 Darkstar is worth it. I think 4 Darkstar is better. This is actually going to be a pretty strong build as well, but it does rely on Xerath and having good Xerath items. As with any Darkstar composition, Xerath is going to be the key if you're trying to play Darkstar as an individual comp. And then about Jhin as well. At the end of it, you probably swap Jhin over so that Ashe gets pulled. So this is the Darkstar variation. You've probably seen a couple of people talk about this. Darkstar has been changed so that when any ally dies, the rest of the Darkstar units get a buff, but the buff is slightly smaller than it was before. So if you want to play Darkstar, this is a Darkstar variation that I could recommend. By the way, guys, all the timestamps in the description for different compositions, and I've linked all the different compositions. I've linked the content creators that have had influence with these compositions as well, right at the top, so you can't miss them. The most people that I've drawn from are from some Reddit posts, JinxedJK and deisik. They're most people that have kind of done a lot of the work in terms of figuring out compositions, so they're all in the description below. I'm adding my own twist to some of these comps as well, but yeah, this would be the 4 Darkstar variation that you could give a go on the next update. So you guys have probably seen this comp quite a lot before. This is 6 Cybernetics, but Echo is incredibly good, and the way that you get to this is you can actually run Vayne over Echo, until we actually find the Echo to get the 6 Cybernetics going. If you don't have the Infiltrator spat for Irelia, you would run her a bit further up towards the front, but the best variation of this comp is going to have Irelia with the Infiltrator spat to combine with Echo, and this actually makes this comp pretty strong especially with Echo being very good on the next update. Echo is a much better champion on update 3.5 because of the way that they changed him. They basically changed him that he does a certain number of hits rather than him hitting everybody on the field. He does a certain number of hits so that when he ults, even when there's like one person left, he's going to hit them a lot of times. So Echo's actually super strong on the next update. And again, this is 6 cybernetics, which I'm sure you've seen a significant amount of in the on the last few updates, but this is going to be even stronger now that we have the Vayne to get us to 6 cybernetics a little bit earlier on. So this is BangBros. It's back, potentially. This is the variation that I've seen deisik talk about, where you have the Ziggs and the Rumble. You stack the Rumble so that he just provides a lot of CC on the front line. There are other variations of this build that you can consider. I have seen 4 Chrono, and I've seen 4 Mystic, as well as 6 Blade Master too. There are lots of different variations of BangBros that you could consider. I'm going to link a few of them. So let's start off with this one. This is essentially stacking Master Yi and Rumble. Yasuo doesn't really get considered, but you're looking to 3-star Yi and Yi, Shen, and Yasuo, as well as potentially 3-starring Rumble in this composition. Those would be your primary goals. So this is the Demolitionist BangBros variation. Let's talk about some of the other BangBros variations as well. Okay, guys, this is the 4 Chrono variation. Wukong could be, to be honest, anything. Wukong could be Thresh or whatever, but Wukong just comes on because he's probably the most achievable in the mid-game. In terms of itemization, you can give Wukong some defensive itemization. Obviously, Yasuo can take extra itemization that you see fit. It's all about 3-starring Shen, Yasuo, and Master Yi. This is the 4 Chrono variation of BangBros, and there is quite obviously going to be a Mystics variation as well that we're going to talk about in just a second. So this is a 4 Mystics variation. Aurelion Sol can be any other rebel, but you would run the 4 Mystics. Cassiopeia could be Lulu until you find the Lulu. Bard is here to help you gain experience as much as physically possible. This is good versus the Sorcerers and, you know, sort of the GP Sorc builds and things like that. So this is something that you would tech in later on. Probably you could eventually replace Bard for Cassiopeia and then keep the Lulu, because Bard becomes a little bit useless as time goes on, and Cassiopeia can actually be pretty useful. So I would consider looking at this composition versus lots of high magic damage comps, and that's where the 4 Mystics is going to come in pretty useful. So this is the 4 Mystic variation of BangBros, and yes, BangBros is genuinely pretty solid on the next update again. It's finally making a comeback. This is the Cassiopeia deisik protector version. So this is where you're not running 6 protectors, you're instead running 4 protectors. You're running Celestial, Darkstar, and Mystic as well. So this is the deisik version of this build, which I'm also going to include in the description below alongside the 6 protector version of Cassiopeia. This is not running Cassiopeia as a protector, this is just running Cassiopeia on the backline. Cassiopeia as a protector is tankier, but if you're running the rapid fire cannon version of her with the Rabadons and the blue buff, she's going to start basically poisoning the whole map anyway. So Cassiopeia is a nice addition to protectors because it provides a lot of extra damage. So I'm going to add this one in as well, just in case. This is the deisik version of this build. This is a build that I've seen talked about a lot, which is essentially 4 Vanguards, 4 Mystics. Now, I'm not totally sure about the Cassiopeia again. This is something that deisik has worked on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the deisik version, and then I'm going to share the version that I think is going to work, I guess, more effectively. This is the 4 Mystic version with Cassiopeia as the primary, the primary carry in this scenario. You can run Cassiopeia without the items, and you could potentially give those items over to Jayce. So I'm going to share this version first because this is the deisik version, and I just want to make sure I put this in because it's good to have the options. But then we can talk about the other version, which is 1 second. I'm just writing this down so I don't forget. We can talk about the other version, which is essentially 4 Vanguards, 4 Mystics, but instead of Cassiopeia having the items, you give them over to Jayce. So Jayce would have Ionic Spark, and he would need to be 3-star. I think you can have blue buff on Cassiopeia regardless, right? And then Wukong would get more of your defensive itemization like this, and it would all be about Jayce being the primary carry. So it's like an old school throwback to Jayce carry. Thresh could be whatever realistically, but Thresh is a nice addition to this composition, so you can keep him. And this is still just running the 4 Mystic variation. And again, could be very strong. We haven't really, I don't think it's been tested enough, but again, I'm going to share this version as well as a Jayce carry variation of the 4 Mystics. So this is a build that I saw on Reddit called Vayne Carry. I haven't tested this build, so I'm going to link you to the Reddit thread where it explains it in a bit more detail, but I wanted to include it because it is something worth considering. And I know there are a lot of builds to consider, but the point of this video for me is just to get as many builds out there from as many different content creators or sources that I've seen if it's physically possible, and collect them all into one space so that you can come back and refer to the end game build. I'm not going to talk about the process of getting there. If you want to get the process of getting there, you need to go and watch the content creators, or if I decide to cover some of these builds in my videos later down the line, or we do a more sort of in-depth tier list later on in the update, then that's where we will cover them. But this is essentially just showing you the amount of builds possible for this next update. So this is the Vayne Carry build. Focuses on Vayne being a primary carry with 3 cybernetics, Leona giving you the Vanguard bonus, Ashe giving you the sniper bonus, and Vayne apparently core being Rageblade and Deathblade. And then she doesn't actually need a defensive item a lot of the time, because when Vayne ultimates and when she tumbles, she drops aggro. So she doesn't actually always need a defensive item to be successful. So this is the Vayne Carry build. Feel free to try it out.